Hey, I'm Nick Fountain. I'm a lawyer in Raleigh. And, we're living in unusual times. Who of us would have anticipated 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, that we would be living like we're living right now? Let's talk about what else is going on right now in North Carolina. Somewhere in North Carolina, maybe at Merchant's Mill Pond, there are a couple of girls maybe launching a canoe today, and maybe the one in the front doesn't know much about it and never been on it, but she thinks this ought to be good, and the other girl talked her into it. And then maybe there's a family on top of Chimney Rock, and they're looking down across the valley and thinking about what a beautiful state we are all fortunate to live in. Meantime, there are, in some other park, there are kids on a swing, trying to swing so high they can touch the leaves on a live oak tree. And there's a busload of kids going down to one of the parks in the Bladen Lakes, and these are kids from the city who couldn't tell you the difference between a bluebird and a blue jay, but they're going to learn those things through our parks. How did all those experiences happen that I've mentioned here? Those things all happened because there were people that came before you and came before me and made sure that we would have parks and places and land that we could all share and have these experiences forever. A little more than a year ago, a longtime client and friend of mine, a good bit older than me, she was 91 years old, but she came into my office to see about making a will and thinking about what to do with her estate. She was on a walker. She was getting ready for back surgery. Other people would say at age 91 you shouldn't bother with back surgery, but there was no quit in this lady. Barbara was a really independent, strong-minded person that had always been in charge of her own affairs, had done things the way she wanted to do them. She was tough. I can tell you how tough. When she was 89, I learned from the neighbors across the street that she was still up on the roof sweeping the pine straw off the roof. She was 89 years old. She didn't need anybody to do it. It took years for anybody to convince her to let somebody else mow the yard. She could do all that. She was frugal. She had been a career state employee in Health and Human Services. She had spent her life dealing with foster children, orphans and orphanages, neglected kids, had dealt with kids. And when she wasn't at work, she loved bird watching. One of the things she would do in the mornings after she retired was the little kids across the way would come to her house. And they would go around back and be sure that there was plenty of food and water for the birds at the bird feeders and like. And she would tell them what birds they were looking at. And she was a very private person, but had wide-ranging interest. She had loved North Carolina. She had loved kids, and she loved nature and all the beauty that we have available to us here in our great state. Her roots in North Carolina go deep, but she'd had houses in Blowing Rock or in Linville, at Sneed's Ferry. She was born in Wilmington. She'd grown up in Goldsboro. She lived a year or so going to school in Elizabeth City. She'd gone to college at Chapel Hill. She was in the Playmakers Theater and in drama there. Everything is about North Carolina and so many of these towns. She'd worked in Charlotte before she worked in Raleigh, and she finished her career and her life living in Raleigh, not too far from where we are now. When she came to me to talk to me over a year ago, she wanted to do something that would be lasting and pour what she had managed to save back into North Carolina and into our parks. And she made clear in the way that she did her will and her estate planning that it would go to the State Parks Trust Fund and to carry forward those missions, because she thought there would be more kids that would benefit that way than were going to benefit in some of the other ways that she could have done. And she'd be able to do something lasting and help out some of the same kids maybe that she had spent years trying to help before she ever retired from the state. So what we're about now is we're about giving $1 million and more to the state park trust fund. And some of that money can go to help with local grants, to small communities that don't have much money to build parks. And remember all those kids and their need for swing sets and their need to know what birds live around them. We'll need to provide that for those communities too. And then the state has embarked on this big project at Vade Mecum, a camp where I actually went for a couple of weeks when I was in 3rd grade, and I can assure you that was a very long time ago. But that camp is in need of a transfusion of money to get it to move and become a part of Hanging Rock State Park. So we've had parks, as I said at the beginning, because other people thought about, what are we going to do? You know, they say sometimes you plant trees when you don't expect to be around to sit under the shade of those trees. So Barbara McIntyre has put $1 million on parks for North Carolina. And it's important that the rest of us, including you that are watching, including me, that we think about, so what are we going to do? And so are we going to pitch in? Are we going to find a way to augment what Barbara has done? Most of you had never heard of Barbara McIntyre until I started talking, but there are plenty of other people who are great people in North Carolina. They are not well-known people in North Carolina, but we have a lot of great people in North Carolina, and maybe you ought to be one.